parties?
We're here at Gamescom 2018. Tam and I have just seen Devil May Cry 5. Tam, you're the Devil May Cry expert of the two of us. What do you think of it?
I liked it a lot. I want to start by up front saying, not a huge fan of the passive-aggressive digs at DMC Devil May Cry that it's having. It's built into the marketing as well. Devil May Cry is back. It's Devil May Cry, the last one was great. I don't know what you're doing. Having said that, it is very much evoking the nostalgia for all the games to the point where when the demo starts and you press start and then cycle up and down, they've used the same sound effects from the original Devil May Cry. So as soon as you start playing, you realize that this is classic Devil May Cry sound and feel. Having said that, it kind of plays in a quite modern way. They've done some modernization to the word mechanics. One of the first things you notice is the camera's really pulled in close.
It's very close.
It's very, very close. It feels almost like Resident Evil style over-the-shoulder Gears of War style camera. And it's also a free moving camera as well, which is a commonplace in action games now. But it makes it feel quite different in a lot of ways. People are used to having very fixed perspective in the classic Devil May Cry games. But this gives it a little more openness. It feels more open, even though it's really tight in. And in terms of how it actually plays, it's very much in line with how people expect the classic Devil May Cry loop to work. It's swords, guns, and then an extra ability now.
Big electric fist.
Big electric fist, and that's prosthetic arms seem to be the thing for this year. Between this and Sekiro, everyone's rocking a prosthetic arm these days. So you play as Nero, he's back, and his kind of prosthetic arm works in a similar way to the way he did in Devil May Cry 4, where he'd grab people from afar.
Yeah.
So and you use that in the flow of combat to kind of build chains together. So you knock someone into the air, you launch yourself up with them, do a few sword swipes, knock them away, and then use your grab to pull them back or pull an enemy in. The interesting thing is you can charge the arm and then charge it to the point where it explodes after you use it. So then he's effectively working with one arm for a while. And that's really, really interesting because you can pick up other arms in the environment as well.
One has a push, one had electricity to it.
Yeah.
And there's moments you were saying that if you get grabbed by an enemy, you can throw your arm at them to create a gap and escape as well.
So it's you have this risk to reward, or kind of you make a sacrifice if you want to do a lot of damage, but then it means that you don't have this ability for a little while, which is a really interesting way to come at combat scenarios, because generally you go into every combat scenario in most action games with the tool set you have at the time, and that doesn't change. This is kind of what if we took this one thing away from you for a little bit, and it kind of makes you rethink how you need to approach each combat scenario. So that's the prosthetic arm is super, super important. You still have your guns as well. In this, I had a shotgun style thing, which was quite slow but does a lot of damage. And between that, the sword, and the arm, which has its own ability on its own, there was one which was an electrical.
It was three
outburst.
different ones or something.
Yeah, so you do a short range explosion of electricity, and there was the other one, like you said, where you press it and it kind of launches you upwards and forward. That was really cool because then you could knock enemies up into the air and then
chase them with
in the air,
force push.
knock them down and then push yourself towards them and grab them as well. Is really, really satisfying to go from ground to air, and it also feels really, really satisfying to hit people with it. That's the one thing that's really important in Devil May Cry. When you swipe your sword, it needs to feel like you're cutting through something, and it does do that.
Well, I was saying to you, I haven't played a Devil May Cry really since I think 3, maybe even 2. So I was kind of worried that I'd go into this game being a bit overwhelmed, and at first there's quite a lot to think about, the new arm mechanic, juggling enemies, the rolling mechanic, which I'm not a fan of, but you say it's very classic Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
But I found myself after 5 minutes just doing some really cool shit.
Yeah.
And that's all I wanted from that experience.
And that's what a lot of people want from a Devil May Cry game. It doesn't the rolling thing that you said is what's interesting is what's changed in that genre since is Platinum Games has redefined how you play those games. You have one button mechanics to create that dodge, Bayonetta's Witch Time. You press a button, she dodges it, it's quite liberal and everything slows down. This is very much the opposite way. If you want to dodge something, you need to lock on, aim, and then roll. It's classic Devil May Cry, and although that feels familiar, I don't know how people are gonna. I think it's very much aimed at the hardcore players. Like
it didn't
doesn't
seem
have
like
that.
I needed it that much with the whole like grappling hook mechanic and jumping anyway.
So the demo ended with a large boss that was doing like really sweeping movements, and I found like in that scenario the grappling being overly reliant on the grapple could be tricky because you pull yourself in, and because he had this really sweeping motion with his arm, he could knock you back and you'd quickly lose health. So I relied on the roll a lot more.
See, I didn't use the roll much at all. I was using the grappling hook and the push to get behind him, slashing his back, and I pretty much didn't touch the ground. But then he would use an ability that like sucked me into his chest
and then fires you off.
Yeah, so he was able to like counter both like strategies of play.
Yeah, so when I was doing that, because of the large range and how much that fire attack, for example, covered the screen, it felt again like very much like old Devil May Cry, where you'd non-stop roll to get out of the way of things. Like that was almost like the invincibility frames of a roll would keep you safe for a little while. Right. So there's times when I was playing like old school style where I'm just constantly rolling out the way of things just to get some breathing room, which is something that doesn't happen in action games now. Now it's like you turn the tables instead of being on the defensive. So it kind of felt good to have that back and forth between a classic and a modern feeling game. The other things that are kind of very, very traditional Devil May Cry is the style of it and the ridiculous, ludicrous like setups. So there's a bit where he's like Nero is standing there and an ambulance falls on him, and it's like the ambulance is positioned perfectly so that the door, the entrance, the side door like goes. He lands in between that, and then it like spins over and it hits a wall, and then he comes out. And you're
it's such over-the-top style, almost to the point of like
parody. And
but it's the only game that it would work in is Devil May Cry.
Yeah, it's very much what people want from it, and it's one of the reasons that people are less interested. They don't have as kind things to say about DMC Devil May Cry. I think it did it better, like it balanced that stuff, because by the time Devil May Cry 4 came out, it was full on cheesy. You had Dante with a rose in his mouth, like dancing around different like action sequences, and I was not a huge fan of that stuff. Now it feels like a little more balanced. Like Nero he's less angsty now. It's like they transplanted Dante's personality onto Nero's looks, and that's the character that you get now. Like we know that Dante is in the game. To what capacity is unclear yet. He seems like he might be like gruff demon hunter back from retirement, or he could be even the villain. I'd love to see him as a villain. But yeah, from what I played so far, I'm very much excited about playing more. I love the Devil May Cry series. They're saying Devil May Cry is back. That's fair, it is back. It is a classic Devil May Cry game, and I think a lot of fans are going to respond to that really, really well.
But if you want to see the sick hot gameplay that we actually played, we're going to have that up on site and on our YouTube as well, so make sure you go check that out. For everything else, Devil May Cry 5, stay tuned to Gamespot. You grapple hook towards the camera.
Let's rock, baby.
That was Wasp.